In the world's great cities, information networks support human ecology. On today's digital journey, host John Gage explores smart cities.
Curitiba, Brazil is solving its urban design problems by thinking of the city as a whole system. By linking the information networks that service the city, Curitiba has developed as a living organism, responsive to changes, capable of rapid adaptation. I'm John Gage. Join me for this digital journey to a smart city.
In the city of Curitiba, 2 million Brazilians have turned their city into a new model for urban design.
It's an ongoing process. I think the planning of a city is something that never stops.
Over time, the city has adopted a systemic approach to solving complex urban problems. Distributed systems of city services overlay one another, intersecting, exchanging information.
Some people compared it to a computer system in which we have a hub and we have a network flowing people throughout pre-assigned routes.
Once a sleepy agricultural center, by the early 1970s, rapid growth threatened to turn a stately colonial city into an urban nightmare of pollution and traffic congestion. Jaime Lerner, an architect and urban planner who became Curitiba's mayor in 1971, was a driving force behind the plan. Getting a consensus began with old-fashioned human networking.
A cidade de Curitiba é uma estrutura de crescimento de vida e trabalho juntos.
We always try to change each problem of the city into an opportunity for co-responsibility. It is not just the government that solves the problem. Each project becomes a cause that we share together, where everyone helps find a solution.
Flood control was a huge problem for the city in the 1970s. Built on a plateau, Curitiba was spending millions of dollars in an attempt to redirect runoff. Lerner's simple solution: let nature run its course. The city built a network of green belts, lakes, and city parks along natural waterways.
And these days, the population, they just go to those parks. They don't even know that park is actually a gigantic water stabilization facility. So there was a planned initiative on the part of the city to combine the drainage problem with the leisure issue, at the same time providing people with a more pleasant environment.
The urban waterways then became an organic blueprint for how the city would grow.
In those days, there was a technological dogma that any city with more than 1 million people would need a subway system. But Curitiba didn't have the money to build a subway. The decision was to use buses because Curitiba had buses and to improve on the existing buses, forming a system.
Curitiba built a modern busway system that quickly and cheaply moves nearly 1.5 million people, over 70% of the population, every day.
There is a direct relationship between the way a city grows and the way a city moves.
Express bus lanes carry large numbers of commuters in and out of the city. Feeder bus routes circle the city, forming a web that ties into the express system at transportation hubs along the route. Bus stops become nodes on a network of essential activities. Shopping, businesses, police and recreation are concentrated at these locations. Like the network of routes in which they operate, Curitiba's buses were designed from the ground up. In response to the city's strict environmental design criteria, Volvo seized the opportunity to develop technologies which can be used in the world's most crowded cities. Now Volvo designs and manufactures a revolutionary new bus chassis at its plant in Curitiba. Carrying 270 people at a time and cutting fuel consumption by at least 25%, these bi-articulated buses demonstrate the compatibility of economic development and environmental responsibility. The busway system, like any successful network, is adaptable. When ridership patterns change, bus routes change, an impossibility with a fixed rail subway system.
So you have much more flexibility on a bus system like this than with a subway, and it's 10 times cheaper.
Now hailed as one of the world's first smart cities, Curitiba has linked flood control, environmental quality, transportation, and economic development through a systemic approach to urban design. The city's web of services is increasingly reliant on the flow of information to ensure quality of life for its citizens.
As a simple technical change, 25 years ago, changed Curitiba's way of developing itself, of creating spaces where people encounter people. Joining me today to discuss the issues of technology, urban design, and how people design spaces for themselves are Alan Jacobs, professor of city and regional planning at the University of California, Berkeley, and former director of planning for the city of San Francisco, and William Mitchell, dean of the MIT School of Architecture and Planning, and author of the book City of Bits. Alan, let me ask you, you've had a great experience in Curitiba. Did the alteration of that transport system, a simple change 25 years ago, evolve in expected ways, or did it make changes in the city that no one anticipated?
I think both. The city is, to a large extent now, in many ways, what they intended it to be. In other ways, it's way beyond that, stuff that they never expected. They started with an extraordinarily simple concept, that a city is a place of encounter, of people encountering each other, and achieving really together what they couldn't achieve alone, and that would be tied to communication. In their case, transportation, and you had to do that with public transportation. You could not do that with the private automobile. And that's where they started, and those two ideas. And they built it. They came up with an extraordinarily simple diagram of a city of 5 major transportation routes tied to each other, a strong center, high density development along those transportation routes, low density development every place else, and therefore the development of open spaces between and using open space as another major place of encountering. And that's what they've done. And in that sense, it's what they expected. The city is what they expected. In other ways, they've just gone, new ideas pop up every Tuesday and Thursday with them, and they try them out. If they work, they work. If they don't work, they haven't spent a lot of money on it. That didn't work. We'll try something else.
So it's flexible enough. You can introduce innovation. Are they trying the newest technologies? They've mentioned networks and the analogy between the movement of people and the movement of information. Global positioning systems allowing you to figure out where things are. Do they integrate the technologies as they come?
They're open to anything. They really are extraordinarily open. But they start with simple ideas around human both problems and potentials. They always talk about this, problems and potentials. What are the potential? And they start with that, and they're usually simple ideas. The potential of industrial development, the potential of the people who are there, the potential of the land. And they start very simply within their means, and then they go. And then they integrate. People can then come up with ideas. Well, gee, we could make the transportation system better with a bunch of electronic devices tied together at intersections. We can get traffic flowing better. So they do that. Well, one of the things that I bet you they never told you about was that having done that whole thing with computers way back when, they could then take the information they were getting and find out and analyze where the safety problems were, where kids were getting hurt, and use that to pinpoint on the spot changes to transportation changes to intersection design that would save lives. They use the technology beyond just making traffic move.
It sounds like a culture, the notion that everything's a problem, the heart of an engineering discipline. It's just a problem. Everything's a problem. We can solve this problem. Has turned in this governance model and the culture of design applied to human problems, transcend a simple problem into a solving of systemic problems, learning from one system how other systems function, learning from transport how safety, how the health of children's affected by transportation patterns.
It's a mindset of being open. It's also, it's a mindset that has to do with potentials as much as problems, you know. Yeah. Instead of spending all your damn time solving problems, what are the potentials? So problem solving gets boring, yeah. You know, gets really boring. What are the potentials of a place? That's dreaming, you know. What could it be? That's more exciting. And then doing it within your means is even better.
In your book, Great Streets, that examines the streets all of us know around the world as places we love to be for a complicated set of reasons, did the Curitiba designers think of the potential for a great street in Curitiba?
Yes, they sure did. And that was to be the heart of the shopping district. That was, and still is, a magnificent achievement, an incredible achievement. Partly technology, having mostly, though, to do with concept and willingness to gamble. In a time when everybody else was building new highways, building in open space, they in Curitiba decided, no, we can't do highways, we have to do transit, and we have to build open space. No one else was doing that in Brazil. They were putting in open space. And one of the places, and tied to two parks, interesting enough, was the main center, the main street of the city. The merchants were opposed to changing it to a pedestrian street. They did it over a weekend. They did the whole thing in 72 hours. They changed it into a pedestrian street.
This was to overcome the merchant opposition?
You bet. They did it when no one was around. They did it on the weekend. Having done that, it was just used like crazy, you know. But the merchants were furious, and they said, and we're going to drive over it the coming Saturday. You know, we'll show you whose street this is, you know. And what did they do? On the Saturday, what they did, at least the story I have, is they laid down a piece of paper down the center of Flower Street. And they put a stick every half meter. And they gave paints and paintbrushes to any kid who would want to paint there. And kids painted there. Well, drive your trucks over that, right? Within 2 weeks, that was, the merchants were saying, let's have some more pedestrian areas here. You know, what's important, though, is that it is now, what, 25 years later, close to 30 years later, the piece of paper is laid down every Saturday, now. And you don't have to be rich. You don't have to talk to poor people if you don't want. But kids are kids, and you see each other. That's rich people seeing poor people. And that's making community, that's making encounter. They have other problems with that street now. They'll solve them. But that's, you know, that's creativity in a city. And who the hell knew that it would be what it is? You couldn't have known.
In the application of the networks, the forms of communication, the conversations that draw a community together, are we seeing any evolution in this? And are we watching new kinds of communities form? We have new methods of communication. Are they being used by people for this same purpose that simple strip of paper achieved?
It's very early to say, but certainly we're figuring out ways to make public spaces in very non-traditional ways, very different from the kinds of streets that Alan has talked about so eloquently. you can make non-physical gathering places, clearly, which have very different properties from physical gathering places. Again, I'd emphasize these things are not substitutes for physical places. If we do them right, we have to think of them as expansions of our repertoire of the kinds of public spaces that we can make, and imagine cities that incorporate physical public space, the great streets, the place where you paint on the paper in the middle of the street, and the virtual spaces, and the two have got to work together in a complementary way. I mean, one of the big secrets of a city is you don't think of the pieces in isolation, right? You think of how they relate to each other, how they complement each other, how they reinforce them. Some very simple fundamental ideas like how do people get together, who do they get to know, what are the social connections that are formed, and so on.
These lighthouses demonstrate how things are done in Curitiba. Symbolic design reinforces the connection between neighborhood libraries and their communities.
The design of a lighthouse came as a visual association between a lighthouse and the dissemination of knowledge.
These small-scale libraries specialize their on-site collections to meet the needs of their surrounding neighborhoods. Like this library that carries a collection of Islamic history. Each library is linked to others in the city along the bus routes and by network connectivity.
So literally from the low-income neighborhood in a medium-sized city in the south of Brazil, a kid can access the world.
Designing systems which are adaptable has been a key to making Curitiba a model for the 21st century.
In 1971, at the beginning, our system of public transportation was very simple. It was only buses running on exclusive lanes, and slowly it changed. Today, it's a very sophisticated system.
Buses serving different functions in the network are separated by color. Different colored buses receive different priority along the system. Sensors embedded in the express lanes track all bus movement. At Curitiba's Traffic Control Center, the steady flow of information from the network of sensors allows operators to clear intersections by stopping car traffic while express buses speed to their destinations. Everything about the bus network is designed for efficiency. There is one fare with free transfers. Boarding time is reduced because riders wait on raised enclosed platforms, allowing easy access into the bus. Multiple doors in the side of the bus allow quick entry and exits for passengers.
Everything that we do each time has a follow-up, an improvement, optimizing. Then, as we progress in quality, we set some standards, then guarantee these standards. Now, with computers and networks, we can advance to the next level.
The Curitiba approach to urban design, planning on a human scale, integrating networks of city services and providing access to those services by bus and by internet is helping to improve the quality of life and creating a sustainable environment. The question is, can the Curitiba experiment be emulated in other cities? Go global. www.djourney.com.
I have another issue. I have another that overlies an awful lot of this, and it is a big issue related to technology and the new methods of communication, and that is how you buy things, who can participate in the community economically. I'm not convinced that the high tech, or isn't even high tech anymore, that the web is that great for the lesser advantaged people and their chance in society. I'm not convinced of that at all, and that is of concern to me. Centralized power bugs me, and I think it goes more and more to that.
technology, I think, opens up a bunch of potentials that can be pushed in a lot of different ways, depending on political will, social commitment, all of these kinds of things. Take something like the centralization versus decentralization issue. And I'll go back to a personal anecdote of my childhood. I grew up in rural Australia, where books were really scarce. I mean, books, it was very, very difficult. And something I've watched over the years as I've gone from city to city is, does the city have a great bookstore? You know, are there great bookstores? Berkeley has a great bookstore, for example. It has more than one great bookstore. And this is something that was very geographically constrained. There are places that had it, places that didn't. Now, what's happened with something like Amazon, for example, is I went back to my little hometown in Australia a few months ago, and the little old local bookstore was still there. Was never very good, but there was somebody there who believed in books and was committed, and you went to him for advice and so on. Now, of course, he has a workstation and a connection to Amazon. So his connection to being able to deliver something into that environment is very much more powerful. That kind of combination of the local and the global, the trusted local person, the local knowledge, together with a global network, strikes me as a very, very powerful thing.
What's the next challenge for Curitiba? Is it a economic challenge? Are they being threatened by globalization? Are they able to form local economic power out of knowledge?
To me, the challenge is to deal with their success. The transit has reached where it is, by their means, a pretty high level of a success. I'm not sure how much more they can get on those routes as the city grows, really, because they're full. Those buses are full, and in that means people are standing, and that means that people may want to go back and are beginning to go to automobiles. That the great strides that they've made in getting people to use transit have to be continued. Well, they may need new lines, they may need new ways of doing that. That's not a small problem. On the other hand, how do you make community? There are other ways. It's interesting, and here's a way that the computer, and technology can help. They came up with the notion that, gee, any newcomer, because they had all these newcomers, had to feel a part of the city, had to feel a part of the community. They had to understand its history, because if they understood its history, if they understood that they were part of the community, then they would want to improve it and help it. And that was an important thing. So they began asking around for information. Just send us postcards, send us histories, send us any history you have of your family, of your city, of your building, what have you. And the net result of which was that that they could put out information about parts of the city, about the whole city, about a family, about a street, about a building, and they were turning out something in the nature of 100 publications a year. If a parish was going to have a local party, if a family was going to have a reunion, if a street was going to have a fair, they could put out a newspaper with the history of all of this. And they would give that stuff to newcomers as well. Here's your city, here's where you're living. They could get out this information to people to make them a part of the community.
One of the extraordinary Curitiba experiments was the establishment of libraries as the core of a neighborhood. How did that work?
Just very, very simple. That it's an old idea from maybe America, the idea of the neighborhood library, all the Carnegie libraries all over America that were built that people could go to a neighborhood library. Well, they didn't have those. In Curitiba, they designed a single model, very inexpensive, a lighthouse, so that there'd be this beacon, and they call it a lighthouse of learning. And they built them, almost all the same in most of the neighborhoods, just they're very simple. Most of the Carnegie libraries were simple too, if you think of them in the same design too. they built them, and then having said we're going to do this, well, learning is different than it used to be. It isn't just books. So they tech them up. They put machines in them that will allow these kids to talk with other kids in the community or with other communities or understand the web and all of that. And so that's a big part of what they do. By the way, before they did that, they took old buses in that city, non-used buses, and turned them into traveling classrooms, so that one bus might just be full of computers to teach people, and then the bus would go to a different neighborhood each week, or twice at nights, and have night classes. Another one was to teach people how to be electricians. Another one was to teach sewing, so that they took old buses and turned them into traveling classrooms. Well, that's both low-tech and high-tech, isn't it? It's using all your resources.
Creative design and creative planning are cycles of speculation and criticism, right? You've got to be brave enough to put what may be a dumb idea out on the table, but a wild idea out on the table. You've got to have enough guts to put that on the table. And then you've got to have enough guts, too, to stand there while everybody takes a shot at it and tries to criticize it and see if it works. That's where the creativity comes from. And the examples we've talked about of success have been exactly these kinds of things, where somebody has said, look, I think this can work. Let's take a look at it. Let's throw it out on the table and see if we can do it. And then they've learned from experience, right? They figured out where it works and where it doesn't. They haven't been rigid about it. They haven't said, we got the solution and this is the solution for all time. Right?
That's right, and that's one of the Curitiba rules.
Exactly.
You don't wait. You don't have the answers before you begin. If you wait to have all the answers before you start, you will not start.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
I'd like to thank our guests. To be able to walk through a city with Alan Jacobs or with Bill Mitchell would change the way we see the evolution of the places we live. For Digital Journey, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'm John Gage.
The information revolution is changing the way our cities move. On the next Digital Journey, host John Gage explores 21st century transportation systems.
From processing stock trades in the financial world to selling hits in the music world, from sharing information in government operations to medical operations, from the manufacturing of products to the interaction of products, from tracking packages to tracking spending. At Sun, our technologies power the net for business. We're the dot in .com. What can we .com for you?